Chapter 2 of Sophie's Adventure to Love, my new novel. Hope you enjoy. I slammed my ground floor apartment door shut hard. After thinking about what Catherine had said, by the time I got here, I was furious. Damned cheek, I spat. Intervention, for God's sake. I threw my keys on the counter along with my bag. I headed straight for the fridge as I shrugged out of my coat and pulled out the bottle of Pinot Grigio from the fridge, and I got a glass down from the cupboard. Fire me, I muttered. Bloody hell, Kate. I poured a generous amount of wine and swigged a large mouthful. Pushed off my shoes. Cold feet. Phone in hand and wine glass balanced in between my fingers, I flicked the heating up and headed for my sofa, slumping down into it and taking another swig of wine. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I looked down. It was Max. On my way. See you in 5. MXX. Max was my adopted brother and my rock. He was there for me through the whole Darcy breakup. I didn't know what I would have done without him. My mum adopted him after my dad passed away. I was 10 and he was almost 5 years old. He'd grown up into a 5'10", lean, muscular, devilishly handsome guy. He had dark brown hair like me and with lovely chocolate brown eyes. He had a soft, heart-shaped face, and his warm smile always made me feel better. Rap, rap, rap. I clambered back onto my feet and moved towards the door to let him in. Rap, rap. Good evening, Grinch, he drawled in his rich, velvety voice as he sauntered into my kitchen. Very funny, I retorted. And a Merry Christmas to you too, Soph. He laughed and gave me a kiss on my cheek. I thought you were off to Sierra's tonight, I asked. Change of plans, he winked at me. And you wanted to chat. Can't let my big sis down, he replied with a wink. He headed to the cupboard by the fridge and reached for my single malt whiskey. Yeah, just help yourself, Max, I stated with a smirk. Ha ha. Why so glum? He asked me. He didn't wait for a response. See, you've gone to town on the Christmas decorations again this year, he purred sarcastically, his eyes taking in the distinct lack of festiveness. Don't you start, I snapped at him, and I filled him in on what Catherine had said to me. She even compared me to Scrooge, I exclaimed. Ooh, she did she? He said. And she even brought up Jake. Ha ha ha! Wow, she went there too, Max laughed. He leant against my kitchen counter, smiling at me. Sipping his whiskey, he watched me, rubbing at my temples again. Come here, he said, patting the stool. He sat me down on it and stood behind me. He placed his strong, warm hands on my shoulders and began to massage them. It felt amazing. Kate's worried about you, he said, as he continued to work out the many knots in my shoulder muscles. I am too, he added. I groaned as he worked. He was doing such a fantastic job, so I closed my eyes and sighed. God, that feels amazing, I said. I heard Max inhale sharply, removing his hands from me and then picking up his drink. He downed it in one gulp. So, he began, ready for the road trip home? My eyes snapped up to meet his. The corners of his mouth crept up into a crooked smirk. How the hell? He shrugged his broad shoulders and sighed. It was my idea as well as Kate's. And I'm not letting you head into the fire without a wingman, am I? I know exactly what Mummy's going to let loose on you, he said with a wicked grin. He stood up tall and placed his hand on his heart. For the greater good, and God blesses everyone. Then he ran as I picked up the TV mag and launched it at his head. We settled onto the sofa and I flicked channels to the 5 USA and repeats of Law & Order SVU. Ugh, why do you watch this stuff? Max asked me. I want to be able to get away with murdering Darcy, I said, stated with a straight face. Max laughed quietly. Yeah, makes sense after the way he treated you. And now I don't want him mentioning again, I said, and I sipped on my second glass of wine and slumped down next to Max. It's all over now. Not what Kate said, Max muttered. Pardon? And I glanced up into his face as he gazed down at me. She witnessed Darcy's little show with you after rehearsal tonight, he muttered. Oh, for God's sake, I can handle him, I groaned. I rested my head on his shoulder, and he moved his arm around behind me and settled it onto my shoulders. I snuggled into the crook of his arm. Max was great at giving comforting cuddles. Comfy much, he teased. I'll move if you want, I retorted with a smirk. Nah, you're not going to get a better offer, he added cheekily, and I slapped him. Ouch! Abuse? Shut up, I said, and Max chuckled. Just promise you won't go there again, Soph, he said, and squeezed me. I glanced up at my brother's face as he stared down at me, and there was a warmth there that I hadn't noticed before, and I had to smile at him. Okay, Max, I replied, and cuddled closer. After about an hour and another large glass of wine, my eyes started to get heavy, and I let out a big yawn. Go to sleep, Soph, Max whispered. I didn't fight it, so I closed my eyes, and as I started to drift, he kissed the top of my head. I thought I heard Max mumble something, but sleep took over. Excuse the cough. The alarm woke me at 8:30, and I groaned with annoyance and scrambling to switch it off. My head hurt. I stretched out and managed to stop the beeping. I blinked and sat up, and I was still wearing my shirt from last night, but no trousers. I know I'd fallen asleep on the sofa, so Max had to have been the one to bring me to bed and remove them. I stood up and headed to the bathroom as I processed that thought. I walked into the kitchen after changing into my pyjama bottoms and old baggy t-shirt. Max was sat sipping coffee. Morning, he said, smirking at me. My phone in my hand buzzed. Remember, Sophie, no work, fun, family, friends and festivities. Oh, and Jake, sort out your love life. Love, Kay, kiss, kiss. I reread Catherine's text. Ugh, this is crappy. Max bumped my shoulder from behind, a trick he'd been doing for years. Glad I've been coming to the gym with you. You weigh a ton, he teased. Hey, I snorted. I stop at undressing you completely, though, he winked. Flush! Hell, why did Max just make me blush? You removed my jeggings. That's slightly one step too far, Max, I exclaimed. I closed my eyes, promise, he said, grinning. Well, it's nothing I haven't seen before, remember? I stared at him for a moment, and then it hit me, and my cheeks burned with embarrassment as I remembered the night he'd accidentally walked in on me in the shower when I was 18. Oh, for pity's sake, I groaned. I slapped his chest, feeling all flustered. I could feel my face burning. Something in the way Max was looking at me was causing me to flush hot. Here. He slid me a mugful of black coffee. You need to get packed for the road trip. And he walked into the living room and laid out on the sofa, stretching his long, toned legs. What about your stuff? I asked him. Swing by and pick it up once we set off, he replied with a grin. Oh, just swing by. You've already bloody packed, haven't you? I snapped in frustration. Yep, he said. So you and Kate really did set me up, didn't you? I said. Soph, it's for your good. We want the old Sophie back, he said, and he smiled warmly. I glared at him as he sipped his coffee and winked. I never went anywhere. I just enjoy my work. Oh, that's funny. When was the last time you came to the gym with me? He asked. When did you come for drinks with me and our friends? Oh, God, don't you start, I moaned. Max winked again and stretched out on the sofa. Tutting, I took my coffee and went to get dressed. After a quick shower and then throwing an array of clothes and toiletries into a large duffel bag, I headed back to my brother. Ready? He asked, as he ushered me out of my door, locking it behind me. No, I answered bluntly. It's a whole big, fat, gigantic waste of time, I cursed, as I stood by my car. Max was chuckling as he put our bags into the boot and slammed the lid shut. He came to stand in front of me, and he placed his hands on my arms. Looking down at my face, he smiled and kissed my head. It's not going to be a waste of time. You need this, Soph. Time to reconnect, lady, he stated, and he pulled me into a hug and laughed. It's going to be fun, you'll see. I'm not that optimistic, Max, I groaned. Come on, it'll be fun to spend time with you again. I've missed you, Soph. He smiled down at me and I couldn't help smiling back. It had been a while since I'd spent any quality time with him. He walked around to the side of the car and he slid his tall, lean frame into the passenger seat. I got in and threw my bag onto the back seat, and as he pulled the seatbelt across his muscular chest, I noticed how he'd grown into a very handsome guy. His frequent visits to the gym were paying off. He turned to me and caught me staring at him, namely his chest. See something you like? He teased in his velvet voice. I flushed and then slapped his shoulder. Oh, don't be weird, Max, you're my brother. Adopted, he winked. Still weird, he exclaimed. Why were we suddenly discussing this? All right, just making a point, he chuckled. Shut up, I exclaimed in a flustered tone. Max laughed and shook his head. Shutting up, he drawled. I turned the key in the ignition and my Skoda rumbled to life. I paused with my hands on the wheel. Oh, this was a massive mistake. I could feel the dread in the pit of my stomach. Jake. That was it. I ran away from my childhood sweetheart and I hadn't contacted him again. I remember how he'd looked the last time I'd seen him. He was wearing a black suit and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the top, with no tie. He was lean and handsome, mousy brown hair which he kept slightly longer on the top, and divine hazel eyes. I gulped as I realised he might hate me. What would I say to him? God, he might be married with 3 kids and a dog. Well, Max's voice pierced my train of crazy thoughts. He had his hand on my thigh and squeezed it. Oh, stop sulking like a teenager. You're grown up now, remember? And he squeezed my thigh again. A jolt flew through me. Max's hand is on my thigh and it was making my body tingle. Shit. Sophie, he asked me again. Yes, okay, I muttered. I turned and pulled a childish tongue out at him, and he laughed as he ran his fingers through his hair. Cute, Soph, he replied. So grown up of you. With that, I released the handbrake and the car rolled off. I steered us down the street and towards our childhood home via Max's place. 10 minutes into the journey, Max found a radio channel playing Christmas songs. He started to hum along to one of them, as he knew I hated them. Really? I scowled. Part of the deal, Soph, he drawled as he stretched out on his seat. Festive fun, remember? Ugh, fine, I grumbled. A silence filled the car apart from the music, and Max seemed to be deep in thought. So how's Cassie? I asked. Around 5 minutes later. Max tensed in his seat, and he kept his focus out the passenger window. We broke up, he mumbled. Oh no! I turned to glance at him. It's okay, he shrugged his shoulders. Just stopped being fun. Just fell out of love for each other. He stared out the window for a moment then, and said, It's fine, Soph. Happened a few weeks ago. And he added it with a little smile. I'm sorry, Max. You should have told me, I said. He turned his eyes on me and stared intently. You've always been too busy lately, he stated. Wow, that hurt. He was still gazing at me, and I turned briefly to catch his eye, but as soon as I did, he turned away immediately. I felt like such a shitty sister right then. I hadn't even noticed that Max had broken up with his girlfriend. That's bad, Sophie. I'm sorry, Max, I said quietly. Silence engulfed us again, except for the radio, its irritating festive playlist. So, I started again. What's going on at home? Max turned his head to me again, but this time he was smirking, reminding me of Darcy. Bam! Heat, floor shaking loins. Ugh, bloody man. I need to know before I jump into the lion's den, I stated. You sure? He asked. Yeah, rip it off fast like a plaster, I said. Living in a small town like Riverton-le Bridge meant your business was not your own. Any secrets were everyone's secrets, and that included my disappearing act on Jake too. So, Sean came out, he said. Yeah, I replied. Well, he got married a couple of years ago, he said. Oh, that's great. Who's the lucky man? Sarah, he answered. My head whipped around in shock. Wait, what? Road! His hand landed onto mine and as he steadied the wheel. I turned back to concentrate on the road, and Max's hand lingered, then he yanked it back. Yes, Sarah, he answered. Wow. Well, I thought he'd marry Ella at first, but then he came out, so I presumed he'd marry a man, I said with a chuckle. Turns out he's bisexual. He likes both, said Max and chuckled too. Ah, well, good for him, I grinned to myself. At least some of us have found happiness, I thought. Shame I ran away from mine. Our neighbour, Mrs. Hanson's been having a bit of a fling with old Mr. James who runs the village hall. I laughed out loud at this, and Max smiled at me with a warm glint in his eye. So it proves it's not too late for you yet, Soph, Max teased. Hey, cheeky sod, I snorted at him. A moment of silence. Not that bad, I said. Haven't got to the plaster ripping bit yet, said Max. Oh, hell, what did that mean? He turned to watch me, and I could feel his eyes gazing intently, burning into my profile. There's a new music teacher at our old school. Kids love him. They think he's like a rock star. Oh, really? Who is this rock star? I asked with curiosity. Max's gaze didn't move. It's Jake. My head whipped round again. Road! Max yelled. I snapped back to the road and gripped the wheel tightly, and my heart was sinking. Jake, I whispered. Max nodded, never letting his eyes move from my face, and I could feel it on my skin. There isn't another Jake, is there? He retorted. Funny, I replied. That's the plaster ripped off, he added. Well, half off. I could tell Max was enjoying himself. Jake Carter, childhood sweetheart. I saw him push a dark red velvet box into his suit pocket. I presumed it was an engagement ring, and I hated the idea of marriage so much it had become literally somewhat of a phobia. So I ran. I ran away and never looked back. Never got in touch with him, and I literally panicked like a little kid even though I was 19. He moved back about 6 months ago, moved into that barn conversion up the lane from Mum's house, Max continued. My hands gripped tighter, my body tensed as my brother continued. He's written a few pieces of music, which was snapped up by that pop singer, Casey. One that got the top 10, hence the rock star. My head was swimming with Max's revelation. I was in two minds whether to turn the car around and say, fuck this. Max had gone quiet, not taking his eyes from me. Soph? Max interrupted my thoughts. Yeah, I replied. It gets worse, he added. How? Jake's dad is dating Mum. And there it was. Boom. I had no words. The car swerved a little and Max's hand went to the steering wheel yet again. Soph, you okay? Want me to drive so we don't die? He exclaimed. No, I blurted. My brain was whizzing and I stayed quiet for a moment. Max just continued to survey my face. Oh, God, I whispered. Max smirked, but it seemed colder this time. You totally remember, don't you, what you did? I was a teenager, Max. I started. Panicked, then ran away, Max finished. I slouched suddenly, fixing my eyes onto the road ahead. I was a teenager, a kid. Oh, shit, I totally screwed up, Max. Is that what you want to hear? I snapped. He stared at me, and then there was something sad in his usually warm chocolate eyes. So you admit that you acted like a shitty bitch? He sounded cold. I deserved that. All right, Max, don't mince your words, I muttered. The iciness hurt like hell. He's my friend too, and I remember what he went through after you fucked off with not a single word. I watched him suffer and hurt for months, said Max. I flinched at his words and then sighed sadly. I knew I was in the wrong, and I hadn't tried to fix it. He continued to watch me as I wallowed in my own rash behaviour, not thinking about Jake's feelings in all this. I don't know what to say to him. What if he hates me? I whispered. Sorry would work, he muttered, and a massive sigh left his lips. Sophie, it's time to let the past go, for God's sake. Everyone else has. He ran his hand through his hair again. Just try and enjoy yourself. That's your orders from Kate and me. He paused and looked at me. That's if you remember how to. I still have fun, I exclaimed. Ha! Snorted Max. When did you last meet me and our friends out for a night out? He asked and crossed his arms over his chest. I tried to think. Nada. Zip. Absolutely nothing. Exactly, he said. He started to laugh quietly, softly. Let's change that this year, he said. And this time he smiled. It was warm. You are hereby ordered to have nothing but fun this Christmas, he stated. His hand went to my thigh again and he gave it a squeeze. Yes, sir, I'll try, I replied. The silence settled in around us, and my head was spinning, and the headache was threatening to rear its ugly head again. I didn't know how I was going to do this, and the crazy feeling in my gut was telling me to run. Run, far, far away. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to concentrate, and Max laughed. Soph, he said. What? Jake's looking forward to seeing you, said Max. Oh, God. This was definitely shaping up to be a memorable Christmas. Tune in for chapter 3.